Guess who's back? All right, everyone, welcome back. It's been a long time. In fact, it's been like a year since my last post. I'm gonna be honest though, I'm posting actually from the same place. It just looks a lot different than it did the last time. I guess I'll go ahead and I'll formally introduce you to the Man Cave. I'm about 99% done with what I want to finish down here, and I'm really excited about some of the things that we have coming now that I actually have the space to work. First and foremost, before I get through anything, I want to thank you guys. My sub count hasn't really drastically dropped. Not that it's gone up, but it hasn't dropped since I've been gone for a whole year. I want to thank you for those of you that stuck around. I'm hoping that you were just waiting for content, and figure, you know what, it's not going to hurt me if I just hang around, and now I'm going to deliver. This video is basically the opportunity for me to reintroduce kind of what this channel is going to be. And what my game plan is for you. In fact, you probably saw right from the get-go, you can see what kept me so busy the past year was the little dude that someone coined very early on, little mrbendawg. In fact, he's just about a year old. He was born roughly around the time of my last update, and I've just been busy. So I'm really excited that we're back. I'm glad that you're here. Let's just talk about in general what the game plan is here and what we're going to look like here, and what things are going to look like on the channel for the future. You saw the panoramic shot, or as much as I could, try to get a macro view of the man cave in general. But so this is like my R&D lab. This is my gaming lounge. You know, this is my production studio. This is going to be basically everything here. It's a man cave. Surprise, surprise. But you saw in that video some of the different things that I have in the works. Some of them were a little bit more obvious than others. But so the game plan for this video is we're going to go ahead and we're going to basically share just some previews of some things that we're going to be working on. I want to give you a tour of really what this whole room looks like now and what my setup is comprised of. And just in general, try to get back into the swing of things. First and foremost, let's talk about the format of what this channel is going to look like for the future, because it's going to be a little different than what it's been before. You remember I was just basically throwing videos in and kind of dealing with projects and stuck with projects, and I felt like I couldn't actually continue posting videos unless I had content for that specific project, and I'm not going to do that anymore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to basically serialize it, and so what that is that you'll see, like, we have seasons and we have episodes, and so right now we're going to go ahead, we're going to call this Season 1. All right, so this is Season 1, Episode 1. We're going to count anything before Season 0, and what we'll do is we'll probably say seasons are going to be roughly, I don't know, we'll say probably every 6 months, and then episodes, what I'm hoping is every week or maybe every 2 weeks. A little bit more consistent, but they're not always going to be the exact same content, which number one should A, keep things fresh, but then B, also go ahead and give me a roadmap to be able, all right, so I have all this video, let's edit it and let's just get it uploaded. And so that'll make my life a lot easier, because it may be I jump from project to project. Now, with that said, I am going to go ahead and create playlists and add projects in as playlists. So the Daytona is going to still stay as its own playlist as I go ahead and work on that, but it's not necessarily going to be always at the same time, because I still have some content from that I just haven't put up. It might be something like that that tech and arcade cabinet that I have at the Makerspace, and yeah, I still have that. It may be some of my other projects, because I've got a lot going on here, and with the whole COVID-19 pandemic, I've got some free time, and really that's what's kind of rejuvenated me as far as really working to get content, was the fact that I do have a little bit of spare time. I'm not gonna lie, I've been teaching. That hasn't necessarily been hectic or busy, but it's kept me preoccupied. But it's the end of the school year. My AP kids are done, actually. Today was basically the first day after the due date for the AP exam. And with football and really my fall in general with teaching as well being in limbo, I'm gonna need something to keep myself preoccupied other than my kid and my wife, because I'm gonna drive myself a little nuts. And so I've got a lot in store coming up, and like I said, I'm gonna try to make things as consistent as I can for you guys, and honestly for my own sanity. But I'm so, like I said, thankful that you're here. I'm thankful that you've stuck it out, and I hope for those of you that are new, you like and you subscribe, and you're kind of interested where we go. Maybe not necessarily this video, but maybe something else you've seen. But without further ado, I'm going to be done being the center, okay, of attention here. And what I want to do is go ahead and give you a tour and talk about the setup that I had here, and why everything, or how everything turned out to be what it was, and also go ahead and give you some previews of some projects, because they are going to just show up as we move along. All right, so the first stop on our man cave tour is going to be my desk, or I guess we'll call it my workstation. I'm going to show you this first because this is where I spend most of my time. It's got my desktop PC here, and you'll notice that doesn't look too different from some of my previous videos, because it really isn't. I also have a desk that looks very similar to what I had. In fact, it is, except for the top. I have just a basic Amazon L-shaped desk that I bought for a few $100, probably 3 or 4 years ago at this point. And it's great. I just needed more workspace, especially because I didn't have my second desk like I did up there, which you saw in some of my other videos. So I wanted this space to increase, and I wanted it to be something that still looked nice considering what I have going on down here. And so what I found was basically a butcher block counter. It's not really a butcher block counter, but it's a countertop from IKEA. Now it was some yellow wood color, and what I did is I used gel stain, because it's veneer. You can't actually stain fake wood, but you can use gel stain. And what I did is I used gel stain, and I used some satin clear and polished it using steel wool. Now it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it does look nice. It's very deceiving. It looks really good, and I'm gonna go ahead and also stain the drawers the same color, so it looks like the desk was two-tone on purpose. Now it kind of ties all together because my shelving is this dark color. That's also from IKEA, but I also have some of the gray for some of my other furniture here, and then I've got some brown. So none of it really matches, so I guess it doesn't matter. But I can be particular like that sometimes, so that's what I'm going to do. All right, so we're not here to talk about the desk. We're here to talk about the technology and other things that you see actually in this picture. So we're going to go ahead and work our way from here and go over, and we'll start with the Mac Pro that maybe some of you saw just in frame. The Mac Pro is something that I actually bought on a whim recently. Actually, it was this past weekend. I was on Craigslist, I think, looking for a Power Mac G5. I don't know why I'm so enamored with Apple hardware. It's probably because it is very pretty, especially the computer stuff. But I couldn't afford any when I was younger. In fact, my first adult purchase when I got my job was a 2009 MacBook Pro. It was one of the 13-inchers, which was like the quote-unquote replacement to the 12-inch, I guess, iBooks. But regardless, I purchased that. But so I was looking for a Power Mac G5, I think, just as like one of the last big power PCs before they switched to Intel. And there wasn't really anything I needed it for. But so this Power Mac actually showed up that was not this one exactly, but the one showed up. It was gorgeous, but the guy wanted like $250 for it. And I was scrolling through, and all of a sudden I see that we've got a Mac Pro, and I'm like, okay, so is this someone just thinking this is a Mac Pro, but realize, oh, holy crap, it is. It's a 2008 Mac Pro. So I knew it was Intel based. I was did some digging. I was like, okay, this might actually be useful for something. So spec-wise, it's a Mac Pro 3.1. It's got 2 quad-core Xenons in it, so it's got 8 cores in it. So it's got some horsepower to it. Now, it's only the base 2.8 gigahertz models. They could go up to, I believe, 3.2, and maybe I'll upgrade the processors at some point. I'm not really sure. When you turn it on, the lights dim. Not dim and stay that way. They just dim real quickly because the thing does pull a lot of juice. So I think it uses a lot of electricity already at the 2.8, so I don't really know what it's going to do at 3.2, plus the amount of heat that it puts out is kind of obnoxious. But I'm going to have some videos on that. I'm going to use that. In fact, it's turned on right now, and you probably saw that I've got PowerShell up right here because I'm currently messing around with some virtualization stuff. I'd love to do some more with virtualization and maybe some Dockers. I'm going to try to virtualize my Plex server. Right now, my server consists of just a small little box that's running FreeNAS, and it's in this closet over here. So it's great for being really simplistic, but I'm not going to lie, FreeNAS is something I don't think I put enough time into. I think it's a really useful software RAID OS. In fact, what I have right now set up is two 6 terabyte drives set up in a RAID 1 software. But what's weird about it is that it uses these things called jails, and what I can really kind of describe them as is they're part virtual machine, part Docker. And if that doesn't make any sense to you, don't worry, I'll explain it more, okay, in a video when I start working on the Mac Pro. But so Plex runs, and it's based off FreeBSD. So Plex not only does the actual company not update FreeBSD, their repositories for Plex, as fast as they do for other things, but then you have to wait for FreeNAS to make their own package to go ahead and upgrade. You just can't upgrade from downloading something off the net. So it's hard to upgrade that. I'm not going to lie. It's probably more like a first world problem than anything, but I want something a little easier to deal with, especially something I can deal with just like here sitting at my desk. Not that I can't remote into FreeNAS, but I guess I'm bored, for lack of a better way to put it, and I've never messed around with any virtual machines. So I installed vSphere 5.5 because it's the last version that's supported by this. But what's awesome is that I can go ahead and do Mac OS virtual machines. I can do Windows, Linux, all sorts of different stuff. And so I've messed around a little bit. So it's not perfect by any means since it's base. It only has 6 gigs of RAM. I bought more RAM on eBay. And then I also bought a RAID card, super cheap, one that was compatible with both the hardware, the Mac Pro, but then also the software, vSphere, so I can go ahead and take those 6 terabyte drives out, put them in a hardware RAID configuration. And I've also got some other ends, like I knew I had this. It's a PCI Express to mSATA like card, and so I can use this to run some OS stuff, maybe even like a scratch disk, because I use that server also as my scratch disk. Which isn't efficient by any stretch of the imagination, but it's better than using space up on my actual desktop here, because I only have 2 1 terabyte drives in a RAID 0 configuration, and I'm running out of space. Anyway, so it's going to be another video, but that's, God, is it a pretty box, and I'm struggling, and that was really part of the reason why I bought it, because it was so pretty. I'm struggling keeping it just there, because it does fit right there, but God, it does generate a lot of heat. So probably my server closet, what I call this, it's really kind of my whatever closet. It's the junk closet. It'll probably go back there, but it'll be out so everyone can see it when they open it. All right, so moving on, we are going to go ahead. We're going to talk about our 3D printer. And so I know everybody here probably knows what a 3D printer is. And if you're one of my students or even someone that I've had as a previous student, I've got a ton of them in my classroom. This is my little home model. I retired it from classroom use, and I bought one to put in my classroom. So basically I swapped out a more expensive one for a cheaper one. But so this thing is great because its footprint is so small and it fits so nice on my desk, but it doesn't use a lot of electricity. It doesn't generate a ton of heat. And with some mods, it's actually relatively quiet. And in fact, you probably saw that it's got a Noctua fan on top. It was a small little, I think 30 millimeter fan. It was loud. It moved air, but it was loud. And so what I did is I replaced it with a 40 mil Noctua fan, and there's also a fan inside the unit that was, I forget exactly what size. It might have been another 40, but I think it was 60. But regardless, I replaced both of them with Noctua fans, so now it's really quiet. Obviously, still the stepper motors make noise. You know, I have to grease up some of the rails, and I think get some lubricant on some of the actual the drive bands. But it's so much quieter than most of the 3D printers that I have. Now, it is small, like I talked about. It's only a 120 by 120 by approximately 110 build area. But it does do everything I needed to do here at home. And so I really appreciate it being here. And I've already done some things with it that are going to be a part of another video for the Dreamcast. All right, so moving on from the 3D printer on my desktop behind me. And I haven't really talked too much about this. It's been here. It hasn't really changed much, as I had said. But it's a workhorse. It's older. I'm not going to lie. The build originated in 2015. Now, don't get me wrong. It is a capable machine. You know, I've done some upgrades from its original 2015 build. It does have an i7 4790K, so it's that Devil's Canyon version, versus the 4690K that I had in it prior, which was an i5. The i7, not only does it have a higher core clock, but a higher turbo frequency. It's also got hyper-threading enabled, so we have 4 cores with an extra 4 threads. And so doing anything from processing video to offloading some of the processing for a game that, something like Arc, for example, which is more CPU bound, my frames remain either more consistent or they even increase when I upgraded. Now, as far as the video card is concerned, I had a GTX 970 in it for a long time, but I did upgrade last year to a 1660 Ti, which is their modern, what is it, Kepler? Is that what it is? I forget, but it's all of the ray tracing tech without the ray tracing enabled. And I don't see a need for early adopting some of that first gen ray tracing, especially since some of the benchmarks for the next gen are already light years ahead of the first gen. So probably my next build will be something like that. But this plays everything I needed to right now at 1080p, and I'm not going to make those changes right now, especially because it is a pretty solid machine. Now, maybe in a year from now, I'll upgrade, and I'm not going to lie, I'm going to switch from Intel and go AMD. They've really impressed me, and now that the 10 series i7 and i9s are out, and how power hungry they are, and how much heat they generate, I'm really sold on going AMD, especially just with the cost. But that's my box. All that's stuffed inside of a Corsair Air 540. It looks like a Borg cube, and I don't know if I've ever showed it. In fact, I'm sitting here, right, but I'll go ahead and I'll show you what that looks like. It's a great case. It is so big and it's so obnoxious, and I don't care. I just don't. But I'll keep that with my next build. It does give you a lot of room for airflow, gives you a lot of room for fans, and this thing runs relatively cool, even with a game in the background. And even when I edit video, it barely hits 65 degrees Celsius when the fans and the radiators are like clogged up with dirt. So that makes me really enjoy the case, considering how hot that Mac Pro gets, and obviously hot computers make rooms hot, and I'm not a big fan of being hot. All right, so we switched scenes, and now we're over here in, I guess what we'll call is our gaming center or our gaming rig. The first thing I'll talk about is the most obvious, and it's this giant thing back here. This is 7300 series LG 4K Smart TV. Now, this is a 55-incher. I didn't go anything bigger, any smaller, based off the space. And in fact, I wish I'd taken some pictures. When I first was trying to figure out what size TV I needed, I had blue painter's tape on the wall, trying to figure out exactly what it was going to look like. I went with the LG and not a typical Samsung because of the picture quality, especially dealing with the price point that I was at. And buying a TV is difficult. In fact, every TV in my house is actually a different brand. There are two Samsungs, but the one Samsung, it's the 32-inch, it's in our spare bedroom, is actually is kind of a piece of junk. But so we have this 55-inch LG 4K TV. It's the only 4K TV in the house that I have. Surprise, surprise. From there's a Samsung 55-inch in our living room. And honestly, thinking about it, I could probably went a little bigger. But that's just a 1080p TV. It's a smart TV, but it's gorgeous. From there in our bedroom is just a 42-inch Insignia, which it's an older model. It's a dumb TV, but it does a phenomenal job at what it needs to do, which is be on so I can watch TV at night when I go to bed. And then there is a 32-inch Toshiba, just a 1080p dumb TV that's in the spare, not the spare rather, it's in Josh's playroom, which is my old office. And then there's that other Samsung that's in the spare, like I said. It's a 1080p, like, cheapo, and picture quality is horrible. But that's what's scary about buying a TV. I'm not considering myself an audio, video, like, you know, I guess snob, but I want something that's going to look good. And so you can look through reviews, but then you got to go and you really got to look. Like the Samsung that I was going to buy before I even thought about this was actually reviewed really well. But when I saw it, I wasn't nearly as impressed. I saw it both with 4K and with 1080p signal running through it. And then while the 4K looked okay, some of that like 240 hertz, like real movement look really drives me insane, especially when the rest of the house doesn't have it. But the 1080p upscaling looked bad. Not like visual artifact or you could notice, but color degradation seemed to be occurring, black levels especially, and in general it didn't look as good. And so this LG was actually rated really well, not only for regular HD upscale, but also you're talking standard definition, which really would be extended definition 480p content. And considering the game consoles I have, that was important to me. Now, all that said, most of my stuff is actually line doubled down here with the OSSC, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But it's it's a great TV, and it looked pretty, and it was $100 more than really what I wanted to spend when I bought it. I bought this for $500. I really didn't want to spend more than $400 because I don't watch TV a ton, but it was so worth it. It looks great when I'm watching sports in the fall, and by sports I mean football. It looks great when I'm playing games. In general, it looks great for pretty much anything. And for the cost, I couldn't be happier enough. Now, the one thing is that it doesn't have great black quality when it comes to 4K. Even though it's HDR, it doesn't have, it's got just your standard, like you're talking edge LED light, backlight. It doesn't have an array behind it. But honestly, if you just watch in the dark, it's not a big deal. But so my TV, like I said, 55-inch LG, that's great. I do have a Polk Audio Bar this was originally, I say it was $500. It was really $579, but it was $500 at Costco versus Best Buy's $579. They wouldn't price match me, so they gave me a deal on this. So I only paid it was like $60 for this Polk Audio Bar. It was almost basically price cut in half. So that thing's phenomenal. I would never buy a sound bar from anyone else ever again, unless they were an audio company. I would not buy a Samsung sound bar. I would not buy an LG light bar. I don't care if it matches the TV, all this other fancy nonsense, and how it communicates, blah, blah, blah. Nope. It's worth the HDMI port, especially when I have an HDMI switcher, and that's just my suggestion. All right, so what consoles do we actually have here? And you can see a lot of them, but I'll go ahead and I'll talk a little bit and how they're actually all connected. And I'll start from the top and work my way down. But so the top is just a standard NES. I say NES. I know some people say NES. I don't really care what you say, although I think NES, you sound stupid. You're saying a name when this is a system. But so I have an NES. That thing is completely unmodified and unmolested, and it's not hooked up. It's there for show. I'm not going to lie, along with the Mario. And then that GameCube Wavebird controller, because that Wii doesn't have GameCube ports, but I'll talk about that a little later. The Nintendo stock, the 72-pin connector looks original, but it's seen better days, and in fact the tray doesn't even go up and down and stay down all the time, so it's hit or miss when it does work, but it does function. It has a bad bridge rectifier, at least from what I can tell, so you can't actually go ahead and plug in the OE Nintendo power supply, the power brick, because that actually feeds AC to it, and then that goes, it knocks it down, I think, the 9-volt AC, and it gets fed in there. So that needs to be fixed. I'm not going to lie, I might at some point modify it. Maybe I'll go ahead and put in a high-def NES kit, which allows me to go use HDMI. But for the time being, it's just there for show. The next one on, and so I have a 20th anniversary, pretty sure it's 20th anniversary, PlayStation controller. For it is going to be my Steam Link. Really not a console, but if I want to play a console like a game, and I want to go ahead and sit down on my couch rather than actually go ahead and sit in front of my computer, it is phenomenal to go ahead and use. It's hit or miss if you have stuff not in Steam itself. I do have this little thing where I can go ahead and launch something from Origin, because I do have Origin. Like, say for example, I want to play Madden. Not that I do often because it's garbage. But so if I want to play Madden, I can launch it from that. The only caveat is when I'm done, I have to go back to my PC and force close the little helper launcher app thing, so I can go ahead and launch another game. So again, it's not perfect, but it does help me out when I want to go ahead and I actually want to sit down and play a game. In fact, I was playing I was actually playing Metal Gear Solid 5 the other day a little bit, and that's perfect because it's through Steam and everything else. Moving down to the next shelf, I'll go ahead and I'll just work my way this direction. I have my Nintendo 64. If you were to call me a Nintendo fanboy, you would be totally right. I've owned, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 launched Nintendo consoles. The Nintendo 64 was one. I had a Game Boy Color at launch. I had a Nintendo Wii at launch. Yes, I had a Wii at launch. I lucked out. And I worked at GameStop and EB Games at that point, man, it was crazy. And I had a Switch at launch. I sat out and got my Switch at launch. This is a launch system, although it is, you're talking, as far as I can tell by the serial number, it was produced in 1996, so the launch year, but it wasn't actually a launch system. I think it was probably the Christmas after, so it would have been, I guess it's 97 then. It would have been a Christmas in 97, so the year after. And I think that's when The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time came out, so it's probably what it was. Now, it came with an Atomic Purple controller, but the Atomic Purple controller would have been a 1998. So I just lucked out. The Atomic Purple is really great shape. The Nintendo's in pretty good shape too, and I bought another gray controller, so I have two. Now, from my actual console shelf to my couch is actually a solid 8 feet, so I had to have a controller extension cables. So I bought them on Amazon. They're cheap, but they really do work. The one thing I will tell you is if you ever buy a controller extension and it doesn't seem to be working, you should always try to clean your controller contact pins first. The Nintendo 64 is notorious for them to corrode if they're not used. And you can clean them by just going in and out a few times. I've seen that plenty of YouTube videos as a trick. Or you can go ahead and get a small Q-tip, get in there with some alcohol, clean them out. And that typically does the trick. The Nintendo 64, it's actually pretty easy to desolder the controller connectors and pull the pins out, clean them, and put them back in. I'm hoping I never have to do that. It's just more effort than it's probably worth. But so my Nintendo 64 is somewhat stock. Now I have an EverDrive plugged in with an SD card with some ROMs on it. I don't actually have any original Nintendo games, Nintendo 64 games right now. And the reason being is that they're really expensive. I might get some classics like Super Mario 64, Wave Race, the two launch titles that I had. I might get them. I might get some others like Ocarina of Time if I can find a gold cart. That'd be awesome. My friend Blaine had one. I wish he would have never got rid of it. And then maybe some other stuff, I think GoldenEye. I had at one point Super Smash Brothers, which is now, I think, like a $100 game. I wish I would have kept it. But so I had the EverDrive, which is great. You can just use an SD card to plug games in and out. You can also go ahead and try games that have been modified, and even some other bootleg stuff. Like, for example, I'm pretty sure the original Animal Crossing on GameCube was actually a Nintendo 64 game that was ported over, and so they have the Nintendo 64 DD version of Animal Crossing with a real-time clock patch through the EverDrive to work, I'm pretty sure. So I haven't messed around with that, I'm not sure. But what I do like is that I have this thing hooked up. I could have done an Ultra HDMI mod, so Ultra being the code name for the Nintendo 64 and HDMI being HDMI. I could have done that if I wanted to spend the $150. The DC HDMI mod, okay, from like Citrus 3000, I think is his name, is another $150. So there's $300 right there for those two systems. And to be honest, the Dreamcast HDMI mod is easy to come by, but guess what? The Nintendo 64, not so much. The Wii has a little adapter for HDMI, but it still only does 480p. And I have an OE HD pack for the original Xbox. There was no point in me spending all this extra money. So what I did is I did an Rgb mod on the N64, which all it does is with a little bit of soldering, and I didn't do this as a video because this was before I really was going to start working on videos again, but it's a little board. It goes solders into the multi-out connector. You have a ribbon cable goes to your red, your green, your blue coming off of the DAC. And then from there, you get crisp, clean RGB signal, which we didn't see in this country. We got the best we got was S-Video until we got to quote-unquote HD. Now, there are some TVs and CRTs that support RGB video. In fact, I had one at one point. It was a Sony CRT, and I didn't realize that's what it was at the time. I wish I would have kept that and not sold it for $20, but it kind of is what it is. But so what I do is I have that mod in, which was nice about it is I can still use the multi-out for S-Video if I do take this somewhere like to my classroom and plug it into my projector. But what I'm using is a SCART cable, again, something we didn't get in this country, is I'm using a SCART cable and going ahead and running that to my OSSC. And again, I'll talk about the OSSC here in a little bit. But the OSSC is connected to pretty much everything in here that's older. All right, my Nintendo 64, my Wii, my Xbox, my Dreamcast are all connected to the OSSC in a little bit different of a way. So that's really useful for me as far as cost savings while still getting quality picture. Now moving on from the N64, going over to the Switch, that's easy. That's connected via HDMI. Now remember, the Switch, even though it's modern, is not 4K. It's only 1080p, and even then it's more like 960p upscaled to 1080p. And if you're using the dock, you're almost guaranteed that all the time, but sometimes it does scale things from 720p and up. And if you've got it out of dock mode, it does that for things like Breath of the Wild. But my Switch is just right there. It's hooked up. I have a Switch Pro controller. You can use the Joy-Cons. And I don't actually have anything else for it, although I would love to get a Bluetooth your Super Nintendo controller just for some of the Virtual Console, and I know it's not called Virtual Console, games for Super Nintendo and regular Nintendo to go ahead and play them that way rather than either of those controller options because it's kind of annoying. I love my Switch. I've been playing it recently. I actually got The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening, the remake for Switch, and I played it as a kid on a Game Boy, and I'm not going to lie, it's great to be able to sit down in front of a big TV in color and play it. It's easy to pick up and put down too, unlike Breath of the Wild, where if you put it down for a little bit, you kind of, oh god, what was I doing again? With this, you have a very concise path, despite it feeling open world, because it is an RPG, and so it's been fun to play. After my Switch, okay, comes the Wii. Now, you'll notice it's a black Wii, and I don't exactly know too much about it. Now, I used the Letter Bomb a jailbreak to go ahead and crack that thing open software-wise so I could go ahead and play bootleg copies of games, emulators, so on and so forth. Honestly, it doesn't have GameCube compatibility because it doesn't have controller ports. That was really why I used the jailbreak to go ahead and be able to play GameCube games with it. All I need to do is get that USB GameCube adapter, and then that thing works like that, and that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to basically do with it. That goes into my Wavebird. I had a Wavebird a while ago, and I got rid of it. I actually sold it to my friend Steve with my Wii launch console, which he tells me is still being used today, which is amazing. You're talking it's almost 15 years old, and it's just used all the time, which makes me happy. But so he sent me that Wavebird controller because he had an extra somewhere. He says that's not the one I sent him, which I believe him. But it's in phenomenal shape. It cleaned it real nice, and they're worth quite a few dollars, like all the other random odds and ends that I have, and I'm not going to sell it. It's just nice to have. And when I do get GameCube compatibility, even if I maybe get another Switch, or rather another Wii, I'm going to use that. Alright, so let's take a moment here and talk about how the Wii is actually hooked up, and this also applies to my OG Xbox, because they're both high-def analog signals that we have to deal with to go ahead and actually get plugged into the TV. Now, by default, the Wii is only going to go ahead and output 480p. The Xbox 360 has the ability to actually output both 720p and 1080i, okay, along with the standard 480p. So I needed something that was going to be versatile for those two consoles, and what I decided on was this component switcher, this brick here that you see hanging on the wall. Now I know it looks like a mess, and I admit that, but with the TV back, you can only really see it at an angle from my desk, and I've tried to do my best to make it as neat as I possibly can. But so what this is a key digital component switcher. I don't remember the model number off the top of my head. I'll go ahead and I'll put that down right here. What this thing is it allows me to go ahead and plug in 4 different component sources, future-proofing myself, but it also goes ahead and outputs to 2 different sources. Now, why is that important to me? Because I want it to be able to go ahead and output by default to the TV, but also output to my OSSC, so that anything that is 480p can go ahead and be upscaled and brought back in via HDMI. Now, the key digital switcher, I bought relatively cheap used on eBay, and the reason being is that component switchers are a little finicky and they're hard to come by today. Now, I think that's relative. Passive component switchers are easy to come by, especially on Amazon, but a lot of them have mixed reviews and some of them can be junk. Passive component switchers have no electrical amplification to them. You can amplify analog signals. So what's happening is that with with a passive component switcher, you're basically limited by the length of the run of your wires. And because that, with all the other nonsense, can play kind of a role in how good or how bad a passive switcher was, I decided to go with a powered switcher. Now, the problem with the powered switchers is that most of them today, the new ones are all dedicated to gamers, and that means that they're expensive. One of the ones I was looking at was really nice. Again, 2 outputs. I think it had 6 inputs, and it had some firmware modifications that could be done. Not that this one can't, but it was like $200. I think I paid like $60 shipped for this thing, and the shipping was a lot because between that and the power brick, the thing's heavy. All right, but so that's what I decided to pick up. So what I have is one output going to my TV. So if I am doing something that's in 420 or 480, not 480p rather, but 720p or 1080i for my Xbox, okay, I can just go right to it. But if I have something in 480p, I can feed it to the OSSC, and then that can go ahead and be line doubled to 960p to my TV, which does a great job of upscaling that to 4K. Alright, so I just wanted to go ahead and show you what that looks like. My HDMI switcher is down here too. I have a basic HDMI switcher for mono price. Now it's a 4K 60Hz switcher, just in case I do anything 4K like the PlayStation 4 Pro or anything newer, but that's not really that complicated at all. Now moving on down, we go ahead and we have our Dreamcast. This is the third Dreamcast I think that I've owned in my lifetime. It might be the fourth. Not because they're junk and I break them, but because I buy them, I play them, and then I was at one point in college, I had all the modern consoles. I had a PlayStation 3, I had an Xbox 360, I had a Wii, and then I sold them all because poor college kids need money. And so I had a Dreamcast originally just at the tail end of high school, sold it, got one in college, sold it. Now I have one, and I'm not going to sell it. The one here is a Revision 1. And so the Revision 1 doesn't have the metal heat pipe, so I can go ahead and do the Noctua fan mod that I'm going to go ahead and do a video on. The rechargeable CMOS battery, for lack of a better way to put it, it's the real-time clock battery, is dead, so I'm going to replace that. And the GD-ROM, although loud as anything, still reads original and burnt discs. The problem is that I don't have a ton of CDRs, and it's just cumbersome, and I'm not gonna lie, like, I didn't think load times were a big deal, guys. Load times suck. Load times are even on original games. Like, I have Skies of Arcadia. Yes, I have Skies of Arcadia. And I can't say I'm a big Japanese RPG guy, but it is a decent game. But so I have that. That, even on an original GD-ROM, is still slow. It's not just the CDRs that are slow. So I was really hemming and hawing what I wanted to do because the GD-ROM still worked and I had some original games. Do I really want to get rid of it? And so you could do, because the GD-ROM's just all IDE based, you can do a mod where you can put a compact flash reader in as a slave drive, and with different software or firmware reflash, you can run games off the compact flash card. It would have required some extensive modification to the system, especially the exterior shell that I didn't want to do, and a decent chunk of soldering on the main board. So I went with a GDMU. GDMU is nothing more than the GD-ROM. It's a GD-ROM emulator that you can put an SD card in and put games on, and again with that software or firmware mod, boom, pick a game, go. So that's going to be a video series we're going to work on. I'm really excited to get that done so I can go ahead and play more games, because I've been collecting some game images, more GDIs than CDIs, because I want the original to dump in there. I have like a 32 gig or 64 gig SD card, I forget exactly what. But so I'm really excited to get the chance to play some more games. Now I have this original Blue controller. I have a VMU. I only have one, and I'm not going to lie. What is nice about some of that software I was talking about that lets the GDMU run is you can copy files back and forth to VMUs. It might be cumbersome, but like I have a save on here for NBA 2K2 or 2K1, I forget, it's 2K2, and it takes up the whole freaking VMU. So it's going to be useful for that instead of buying VMUs, although I'm pretty sure you can buy them on Amazon still new in the box. So the Dreamcast, like some of the other systems I have, can be modified to use HDMI, but because of all the systems I have, the money involved in modify them all to use HDMI would kind of be obnoxious. So because I use the OSSC with my N64 and some of my other retro consoles, the Dreamcast is no different, but rather than using component, SCART, whatever, the actual Dreamcast supports 480p/RGB out of the box with a VGA cable. Now, I know people will sit there and argue VGA is not RGB. It's the same damn signal at a different refresh rate, a vertical refresh rate of 31 kilohertz versus 15 kilohertz. But regardless, okay, VGA works stock out of the box. Now, I have a cheap VGA cable because some of the more expensive VGA boxes, while their quality is better, are a little cost prohibitive in my opinion. I might upgrade at some point, but I plug that into the OSSC, and I can go ahead and play games at 40p, line doubled to 960p. And I'm not going to lie, I'll show you some footage here, but it's damn pretty, all things considered, that this is a 20-year-old console. So that's a great solution for that. I play more 3D stuff Then I do 2D stuff. The 2D stuff probably could use some scan lines, while the 3D stuff looks great as it is. But so that's how I have the Dreamcast plugged in. Again, I know it's not digital, but it is, in my opinion, it is the best way for my system and my setup to work, so that's why I did it that way. Now, moving on from the Dreamcast, I do have my Genesis Mini, and my Genesis Mini was more along the lines of like a nostalgic purpose, but now that it's jailbroke, I can do some different things with it. But so the Genesis Mini, I got that because the Genesis was the first and only 16-bit console I've ever owned. The Super Nintendo, the Wii U, and the Virtual Boy are the only Nintendo consoles that I haven't owned other than the DS, and I'm just not even going to get into the DS. But with that said, I didn't have an OG Genesis. I didn't have a Model 1 like the Genesis Mini. I had a Model 2, but I always thought that the Model 1 looked so much cooler. So that was a great little pickup. It's got some great games out of the box, but with that mod, I can go ahead and add games not only for Genesis, but also 32X and Sega CD. So it does become a really neat little retro console, and because I have a wireless 6-button controller, it allows me to go ahead and just sit down and not worry about a cord and just go and play. And that, unlike some of the other retro stuff, because it is an emulation-based device, it's all HDMI, so it just goes into my HDMI switcher. Now, moving on from there, okay, we have my original Xbox. So my OG Xbox, okay, is modified. It's got a Noctua fan in the back, so it's quieter, because the original OG fan is so loud. I could probably do a better job of rerouting air by actually creating a 3D shroud, so maybe that's something I'll do, but it does a good job and doesn't get hot when I play, so what does it matter? It is software modded, so it does have a copy of XBMC on it, which is the Xbox Media Center, which allows me to go ahead and do things like emulation, play games from the hard drive, so on and so forth. And I actually at one point picked up, okay, a hard drive to increase the size. The original hard drives in the Xbox were only 8 or 10 gigabytes, and they were locked. You can actually rip the key to lock and unlock the drive, but unless you have a drive that can also be locked, it doesn't serve you a purpose. I found a drive. The biggest I could get was 320 gigs. It's a Western Digital Blue IDE hard drive because that's what's in it. I went ahead and locked it with the stock lock because, again, it's software modded. It's not hardware modded, so it does unlock and lock the drive. But now I have a 320 gig drive in there, which allows me to go ahead and dump games, emulators, so on and so forth in there. All right, so I keep talking about the OSSC, but I actually haven't filled you in on what it is, what it does, so on and so forth. So let's just get into that real quick. The OSSC is right here. It's an acronym, and it stands for Open Source Scan Converter. And really what it is a bunch of hardware and software that anybody can go ahead and put together and use to basically upscale, okay, in a, I guess we'll say a non-traditional manner when it comes to analog video signals. Now I say non-traditional because most TVs will go ahead and use some kind of software upscaler to make things look a little softer, deal with color, so on and so forth. Nothing about the OSSC, okay, does any kind of actual, I guess, filtration of the signal itself. What you have to understand, okay, when you get analog TV is that you get, okay, line by line what it looks like. That's where you get the whole idea of the 480p or progressive scan, is that you have lines that are scanned like older CRTs. And so what we end up doing to go ahead and upscale with the OSSC is we just double those lines. So what we're effectively doing is making one line the thickness of 2 to increase the size of our resolution, and that doesn't do actual processing to the video. Why processing sucks, okay, I can explain to you real quickly, is for those of you that have ever played a video game on a modern TV and not turned off game mode. Game mode turns off all the post-processing when it comes to your screen. With post-processing, you get things like anti-aliasing, color correction, so on and so forth, and it increases the lag associated with the picture. Now, they solve this with sound so you don't notice it. But when you're trying to do inputs, like with a game controller, and you need precise movements for jumps, or you're doing a fighting game where precision matters as far as combos, guess what? You can't get that when all of a sudden you've got milliseconds of lag. And I know I'm sitting there saying milliseconds. 30 to 50 milliseconds could be the difference between you getting that jump or just missing it, for you getting that combo or just getting hit by that combo or getting it blocked. And so that's why this thing is so neat, is it does no post-processing, it's all hardware-based, and all it does is just, bam, double the lines, triple the lines, whatever it needs to do in order to get the signal that you need. Your TV doesn't do that. That's why game mode matters. It turns all that off. And so now all of a sudden you're dealing with 3 to 5 milliseconds worth of lag versus 30 to 50, and even some TVs are higher, like 100 to 120. All right, so that, and those numbers I'm off the top of my head, so I might not be perfect, but that's what the OSSC does, is it increases the resolution without doing any processing, so it doesn't increase any lag. Now there is some inherent lag going from analog to digital to the TV, but it's so minuscule that you don't notice. And in fact, you can actually adjust that, if I remember correctly, either on the OSSC itself via a menu or with your TV, or maybe even a software flash, I can't remember. Alright, so last but not least on our tour of the Man Cave, okay, going to stop at the Daytona. I couldn't help myself. Let's be real, this is the reason we started this channel, although we're going to go ahead and we're going to expand beyond just this. This still has some odds and ends that need to get done. In fact, I even have some footage of me going through and putting in some modern lighting in the marquee and getting some of the coin box stuff refurbed and everything else. And hopefully I can get that edited and kind of get it rolling. But I mean, basically that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for dropping by and watching. And you know, if you liked what you saw, or you know you're excited for some of the future things, or even you watch some of the old stuff, please go ahead and like, subscribe. You know, like I said, be on the lookout for things coming, like I'm hoping every week. First thing up, most likely going to be my Dreamcast. Go ahead and get that GDMU installed, that Noctua fan, and you know, have some fun with that, and then we'll go ahead and go from there. But until next time, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to play a little bit.